Oh God, Dane.
Hello and welcome to Who Is Best, a show where I look at and take games that give you choices and rate those choices in a tier list. It's been a while since we made a weapons tier list, and why not make one of 2023's true Game of the Year? I swear, Korea's game designers are on absolute fire. You have Nikki, The First Descendant, Stellar Blade, and of course the game we'll be talking about today, Lies of P. Now as far as weapons go for this title, rating these weapons are a bit tricky. You see, there's actually no truly terrible weapon in Lies of P because the weapon customization system. In LIP, you can break down every weapon, minus boss weapons, into handles and blades. You can then combine handles and blades into a custom weapon of your choice. The handles determine moveset, stat scaling, and the secondary Fable art, which is a special ability you can use when you have enough energy. The blade determines the attack and guard stat, primary Fable art, shape, and reach, as well as the weight of your weapon, which can affect speed. In today's list, I'm going to try and rate each weapon as is, while also considering its potential for weapon combinations. If a weapon has a terrible blade, but an amazing handle, it could still rate higher than a mid-blade and mid-handle combination. Another note, boss weapons cannot be broken down and thus are made specifically to be strong as is. This makes them some of the best weapons in the game. During your playthrough, after defeating a boss, you'll have the option to turn their ergo or soul into either a weapon or an amulet that boosts specific stats and abilities. This makes boss weapons tricky because there are some that aren't worth making due to the amulet available. On top of this, most boss weapons beat out standard weapons, but not some weapon combinations. So if they appear lower on the list, that will usually be why. One final note, I will be considering accessibility of a first playthrough. New Game Plus will be a much different experience as the post-game weapons and every possible combo will be open to the player. Consider this a tier list of your first run with a slight consideration for future runs. And hey, while I have your attention, why don't you hit that subscribe button and click the link in the description to see our perks for Patreon members. Also, stick around to the end for a bonus list. The tier. Proof of Humanity is one of the better weapons in the game. It's not the best by any means, but it's high up there. It has a wonky moveset and is pretty slow, but extremely powerful. Why it fell on the tier is that it's obtained from the final boss in the game, making it an exclusive New Game Plus weapon. Upon researching this tier list, I found out that Golden Light can actually be obtained in your first playthrough if you follow specific requirements. That being said, it's still just an okay weapon. Its Fable arts suck, and with the existence of the DLC weapon, there's just no real reason to ever use it. The low tier. The Carcass Crystal Axe is a great choice for an advanced build, that is at the end of the game. Its moveset is good and it melts human enemies, but unfortunately you get it a little too late to make a difference. The Great Sword of Fate is the worst of the three starting weapons. It has a good poking moveset and a decent Fable art, but its damage is just okay, and towards mid-game, almost every hilt and blade will outpace it. The Military Shovel is a gimmick weapon for the most part. The blade is all but useless, but the handle does come with one of the longest reaches in Lies of P, for 15 seconds. Stick the bone-cutting saw blade on this, and, at least for a few seconds, you'll have the longest range in the game. Unfortunately, as soon as the buff wears off, you're back to having just a basic weapon. With the right handles and amulets, the Spear of Honor can become a decent greatsword. It does well with sweeping damage and has a decent Fable art. Unfortunately, this weapon is dependent on so many other factors to make it viable. Post-patch, the Acidic Great Curved Sword could actually land higher on this list. It has one of the fastest greatsword movesets and its Fable art is great for guarding against attacks. The issue is that it has terrible range, and if you're going for an acid build, better to use the Acidic Crystal Spear instead. The Cursed Knight Halberd is acquired in the endgame, and aside from being a decent poke and slash weapon, might as well be forgotten. The Fire Axe has a disappointing lack of fire to it. It's also one of the most basic weapons you'll find. It's mainly used for a hit and run strat while abusing stagger on bosses. Alright, we're going to split the mid tier into two parts, so let's start with the lower mid tier. The City Longspear just barely made it into the lower mid tier due to its handle's quick moveset and optimal crit ability. Spamming R2 will lead to the obliteration of some enemies, especially if you have either a spear or dagger blade connected to it. The Etiquette by itself is one of the weakest weapons in the game, but given the Arm of God and certain amulets that buff pokes, the Etiquette can be transformed into the cheesiest weapon in the game. Hide behind your shield and poke is the strat here. Unfortunately, the amulet you receive from the boss's ergo is much better than the etiquette, meaning there really is no reason to use it. The Tyrant's Murderer's Dagger is the second best critting dagger in the game. It has a wicked fast moveset, and if buffed with the crit amulets and grindstones, it will dish out some impressive damage. The Master Chef Knife, paired with a blade like the Black Steel Cutter, Bone Saw Blade, or Live Puppet Axe, becomes a wicked fast slashing machine. If its charge attack was a lunge instead of a swing, it might have landed higher. If you can figure out the moveset, the exploding pickaxe handle can be one of the best in the game given the right blade. It has a solid heavy attack and its Fable art has incredible reach. That being said, there are better options that take less time to master. The Noblesse Oblige is the single best strength weapon in the game. Its attacks hit like a truck and have insanely fast animations for a heavy weapon. On top of all that, it can also stagger enemies faster than any other weapon. Unfortunately, you'll really only use this to beat the final boss, as the second to last boss in the game drops it. When starting out, one of the safest choices is the Puppet Saber. This weapon is as standard gets. You could use it throughout your entire playthrough, though it will quickly fall behind the mid and late game weapons. Aside from that though, it's a great choice for any newcomer. The Pistol Rock Drill's moveset is stubbornly linear. This is a thrusting weapon if there ever was one. If you're up against the right enemy, then this will be no problem. The drill will obliterate them. But if an enemy's moveset doesn't complement this attack type, you're going to struggle. The drill's handle pairs best with elemental daggers. The Blind Man's Spear is unique among other weapons, as all of its attacks have block and parry frames. This means that with exact timing, you can both block and attack at the same time. Pair that with the handle's Fable art, and you have one of the best countering weapons in the game. The final member of the lower mid tier is the Clock Sword. This weapon's blade and handle are incredibly versatile. Neither will make it to an endgame build, but both are useful in their own right. Let's move on to the upper mid tier. The Acidic Crystal Spear is really the only acid weapon worth using, and it's good. The blade is pretty much built to counter human enemies as they're weak to both piercing and acid. Its handle is great for an advanced build, as swapping the Acid Crystal, Salamander Blade, and Electric Coil on it will give you an elemental advantage no matter where you go. And speaking of, the Electric Coil Stick is one of the best early game weapons available. It works for both an advanced or strength build. It's heavy, so it can stagger enemies, and against puppets, its electric element shreds through them. If combined with the Krat baton handle in the early game, nothing stands a chance. The circular electric saw becomes a great replacement for the electric coil later on in your playthrough. Ditch the handle as soon as you get it though. Its moveset is absolute garbage, but slapped on a short-range, fast handle like the curved sword handle or Master Chef handle, and buffed with electricity, and the electric saw obliterates puppets and bosses alike. An upgrade to the Master Chef handle is the Bramble Curved Sword handle. This thing's moveset is fast and impenetrable. Unlike the Master Chef handle, it has both relentless swings and boosted reach, making it incredibly viable with blades like the Saw Blade or Big Pipe Wrench. Speaking of the wrench, the Big Pipe Wrench combined with the baton handle can make for an incredible strength build in the mid game. Its reach sucks, but its damage and stagger are off the charts at this point in the game. The Coil Molineer and even the Live Puppet Axe will easily replace it, but both those weapons are acquired later, making this a solid mid-game choice. The Frozen Feast has potential to be one of the higher damaging greatswords in the game. Overall though, you'd probably want to just use the 7-coil Spring Sword instead. The Frozen Feast moveset is one of the hardest to master in the entire game. On top of that, the casing mechanic just ends up being a bothersome mechanic that takes more than it gives, but if mastered, a player could dish out some impressive damage with this bad boy. The final weapon of the upper mid tier is the Live Puppet Axe. This thing's blade has the single highest physical damage stat in the game, beating out weapons like the Coil Molineer and Bone Cutting Saw Blade. It's not a bad weapon, and its handle is even pretty useful if you're looking for some good range. The reason for placing it lower on the list is pretty practical actually. This thing is just too big. You can't see a damn thing. In certain situations, this can be detrimental to your game, making it a less than ideal weapon. Better to take the slightly lesser damage of the Bone Saw or Molineer. Let's move on to the top tier. From this point forward, every weapon is viable for the endgame in one way or another. First, we have the Dancer's Curved Sword, which has one of the best movesets in the game, and paired with a blade like the Bone Saw Blade and a Tech Crank, it becomes one of the best technique weapons in the game. The 7-coil Spring Sword is probably the single best choice for any playthrough. It has no real weaknesses. Sure, mastering complicated movesets and making specific combinations will beat it out, but if you don't want the hassle, this thing's moveset, damage, and guard parry abilities are perfect for anyone. The Black Steel Cutter Blade is a deadly combo. Its handle has a solid moveset that complements most blades, and its blade is the second best fire blade in the game. Fire is effective against carcass enemies, which will make up the majority of enemies in the late game. Pair this blade with a different handle, or heck, keep it as it is, and you will have a top tier weapon. Speaking of top tier, the Salamander Dagger is the single best dagger in the game. Specifically, its blade is the single best dagger blade in the game. Placed on something like the Acidic Crystal Spear handle, the Pistol Rock Drill handle, or heck, pretty much any handle, and you will absolutely destroy carcass enemies with ease. The Puppet Ripper has a unique ability different from any other weapon. Its heavy attacks go through walls. This makes it an ideal weapon against mobs tucked in tight spaces. Similar to the Etiquette, the Puppet Ripper is one of the cheesiest weapons in the game, bar none. The Crap Police Baton handle is the single best handle for a Motivity build. Pair this thing with any heavy blade, be it the wrench, bone saw, puppet axe, or probably the single best pairing, the Molineer, and you have an absolute beast. Its only downfall is the blade being complete garbage and its range. That being said, you get it early, it scales perfectly with Motivity, and well, yeah, it's awesome. Aside from its range, the Coil Molineer is a punishing weapon, used to dish out some of the hardest hitting damage in the game. It staggers bosses with ease, its electric damage shreds through puppets, and despite its range, it manages to be viable from the moment you get it to the end of the game. Pair it with the Crap Baton handle to make a devastating Thor's Hammer. The Ouroboros Eye's gimmick and range are unique. There are some steep disadvantages to the eye, but some immense advantages as well. It essentially is used to reduce stamina and durability consumption of your attack. Its Fable Art is expensive and it struggles to stagger enemies, but aside from that, it is an amazing weapon to use. Easily the best handle for the early to mid game is the Booster Glaive. If the Wolong Crescent Glaive didn't exist, then I would have thrown this puppy on the god tier. It's easily the most versatile handle in the game with incredible range, a solid moveset that's fast and efficient, and it pairs with nearly every slashing blade in the game. I personally beat the game with this and the Bone Saw Blade, which is easily a god tier combination. The god tier. The Wolong Crescent Glaive is a DLC weapon and is available before you even pick a weapon. Its moveset is godly and its reach, speed, and damage are unmatched until the endgame. The single most effective part of this weapon though is its Fable Art's ability to dodge through attacks. If I had to come up with a downside here, it's that its charge heavy isn't worth using. But that aside, this is the most accessible weapon in the game and is only matched by endgame combos, placing it in the god tier. The Wintry Rapier is the single best starting weapon in the game. Just by itself, this thing is insane. The stamina consumption on the Rapier is nearly zero, making it easy to hit the enemy dozens of times, and still have the stamina to dodge away from retaliation. On top of stamina consumption, the recovery after a swing is a millisecond, which makes this the fastest blade in the game. The damage isn't high, but an aggressive player who makes their own openings will easily make up for the lag of individual hit damage. All in all, like the Wolong Glaive, this weapon is both accessible and effective throughout. The Bone Cutting Saw Blade has the third highest damage of any blade, potentially the longest reach of any weapon, and aside from piercing handles, is the single most versatile blade in the game. The handle is utter garbage, but that's because the blade is just so damn good. Pairing this with the most versatile handle, the Booster Glaive, makes for one of the best combination weapons in the game. The third best weapon in Lies of P is the Trident of the Covenant. The running R2 and charge attack simply make this one of the best weapons in the game. Most spears in Lies of P struggle with crowd control, but the Trident has an insane sweeping attack that makes up for this gap. Throw on the shield arm and go with the block and poke strategy, and there is no boss or enemy that can stand up to you. Next is the Holy Sword of the Ark. Let's just lay out the checklist of reasons why this is second on the list. It has the best range of any weapon in the game. It does incredible stagger damage. It's the fastest greatsword. Its Fable Art is amazing, and it does both god tier damage to bosses while also being useful for crowd control. Holy Sword of the Ark has absolutely no weaknesses whatsoever. The final weapon, which honestly deserves its own tier, is the Two-Dragon Sword. The Dragon Sword is so much better than any other weapon on this list. This mainly boils down to the heavy parry, which is broken. It's the single best parry ability in the game. It can disrupt any enemy combo while simultaneously inflicting stagger damage and opening them up for a charge heavy attack. If you can master this, then you will be a god, no questions asked. And that's our list. Let me know your favorite weapon combos in the comments section. Thank you to all my Patreon members for their support, and if you would like to request your own list as well as get early access to videos and an entire library of exclusive content, click on the link below and join the Pro tier today. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all later. Bonus round. Coolest weapons in Lies of P, go. Number 10, the Electric Coil Stick. Number 9, Holy Sword of the Ark. Number 8, Puppet Ripper. Number 7, Circular Electric Chainsaw. Number 6, Pistol Rock Drill. Number 5, Big Pipe Wrench. Number 4, 7 Coil Spring Sword. Number 3, Bone Cutting Saw. Number 2, the Booster Glaive. And number 1, the Black Steel Cutter. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you like this weapon tier list, I have a few more. I've made videos for both Bloodborne and Nier Automata, so check those out if you're interested. See ya!